Thanks for listening to the GOSH podcast, the Gynecologic Oncology Sharing Hub. We share real, evidence-based discussions on gynecologic cancers featuring stories from patients, survivors, researchers, and clinicians. Our podcast is produced and recorded on traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. It is produced by the Gynecologic Cancer Initiative, a BC-wide effort to advance research and care for gynecologic cancers. Hello, everyone. My name is Sabine, and I'll be your host for this episode of the GOSH podcast. Today, we're kicking off our Rare Cancer series with an incredible guest, Nancy McKinstry. Nancy is a former Vancouver investment advisor and vice president at Odlum Brown. In 2005, Nancy was diagnosed with clear cell ovarian cancer and underwent successful treatment. Since then, she's embraced her second life by pursuing passions like rowing, building her dream home, and supporting community charities and causes close to her heart. One of Nancy's most remarkable contributions has been her work with OVCARE and the GCI. She has played a key role in shaping strategic plans for gynecologic cancer research, helping secure $100 million in funding in just 5 years. She's also established initiatives like the Nancy McKinstry Trainee Excellence Award to support emerging researchers in ovarian cancer. Despite facing a recent recurrence of her cancer, Nancy's determination and gratitude have only grown. She continues to make a difference through an ovarian cancer research endowment fund that has now surpassed $934,000. I'm thrilled for you to hear Nancy's inspiring story and insights in this episode. Let's get started. So we'll get started.
Yeah.
So can you please share your diagnosis and recurrence journey with me?
I was first diagnosed with ovarian clear cell cancer in 2005. I retired from my career at age 55 in 2004. And in 2005, I came down with ovarian cancer. So when that happened, it was shocking because there's no other ovarian cancer in my family or breast cancer. So there was all the obvious things were not there. So, how and why, nobody knows. The first thing that Greg and I did was sort of look around North America to see where the best cancer treatment available was. And, we narrowed it down to about 3, and one of them was Vancouver. And we both agreed that the best thing to do would be to take advantage of having it in our backyard. And with the support of family and friends, we went ahead there. And I can only say I'm so pleased that we made that decision. At that point, Diane Miller and David Huntsman were sort of the key people in that group. And Diane actually diagnosed my cancer. So I feel like I've always been in good hands. And it was about an 18-month schedule where I had the surgery. They went through both the chemo and radiation treatments, and then had a good year. That was sort of 6 months, and then had a good year of just sort of recovering. But it allowed me, I was retired, so it allowed me to, travel and do the things that I love to do without any real concern. And, the first sort of 5 years after, you're a little nervous that, and of course, they're watching you very closely at that stage to see if there is a reoccurrence. 10 years goes by and I'm fine, no problems. 15 years goes by, no problems. So you get that attitude where, okay, I'm home free here. This is not coming back. And then in 2021, they diagnosed, I had some obvious things that weren't working properly. And I have some other health issues with my kidney. So in one of the investigations around my kidney, we sort of came across the tumor, and immediately, of course, everybody took action, and you know, to have a recurrence of ovarian clear cell is never a good sign. So, it's been a difficult few years. I've been able to live quite fully during that time. And, still am optimistic that I'll be able to prolong my life as long as I feel well enough to carry on. And I guess it forces one to do a lot of reflection, and I think that that's always a good thing. I feel with Care that I've been in such good hands all the way along, and I've maintained a relationship with Care as a donor, for one thing. And I've had the occasion to have Diane or David or one of the other physicians come and speak to different groups of women. So we've always been, very, a lot of back and forth over
Yeah.
the years. So
I mean, I'm glad you were in good hands. They're
yeah,
amazing people.
absolutely,
And how did
absolutely.
you come to work with them and with Care in general?
Well, in 20, I have to think, I believe it was sort of 20, almost 5 years ago. So it had to be about 2020. Gavin Stewart and Diane Miller asked me for a meeting, and said, we're doing great things, but we think we can really lever what we're doing and do better. We need somebody from outside this bubble that we live in to kind of have a look at how we're going about it, and how we could perhaps incorporate some efficiencies, improve our donor base. And would you be willing to help us out here? So this is right down my alley. And I said, absolutely. So 18 months we spent on the GCI, Gynecological Cancer Initiative. And, the goal, the first goal, and sort of the mission statement of that initiative was to reduce the death and suffering for ovarian cancer patients by 50% by 2035. And that seemed like, I'm used to working on much shorter timelines. And sort of attached to that was that we need to raise $100 million. And so that number didn't scare me. It scared them. It didn't scare me particularly. And I said, there's no way that you need to look out as far as 2035 to raise the 100 million. I said, let's give ourselves a time frame of 5 years. And I'm sure you probably know the outcome of that. They more than raised 100 million. But in that process, we had to establish some governance around how this would work because of all the institutions that were involved. So not only is it VGH and BC Cancer, but it's BC Women's Hospital, UBC, across the board. I've got a list of them all here, but I don't think that's entirely relevant. So somebody had to get the governance structure in place as well. And so the first thing that I did was I went to each of the institutions that were participating in this and interviewed the key people that were working on or with patients with ovarian cancer. And that process of going to each of the institutions, doing that, I talked to patients that were willing, the patients that the team knew, and had conversations with them about what their expectations were. And from a strategic point of view, we sort of divided it up into prevention, detection, treatment, and survivorship. So a lot of the initial work was just done actually setting the template on how we would look at this problem. And we went back on all the funding and the money that had been raised over the previous 5 years to establish where, in fact, the money was coming from. Was it coming from pharmaceuticals? Was it coming from government? Was it coming from individual donors? I think we had 5 categories. And so fortunately, they had some resources that they could lend me to do all of that legwork.
Yeah.
And so we saw where the money was coming from. And it also identified opportunities, which was terrific. And then we could target any marketing that we were going to do around fundraising to those specific areas and use everybody's influence in whatever area that they had their expertise. And so that's what we did, and established that basic framework. So
Yeah, that's amazing. And I guess you talking about how you knew that it would take less time speaks on how your experience and your previous work actually helped. So I was wondering, how do you think your background in finance and business as a leader contributed to the development of GCI?
just all of my work experience and my history with finance and dealing with clients, which were patients in the case of this, it was just a no-brainer for me to accept this challenge and dig in. So, in the heat of it, I was probably working 30 hours a week on the project. And there was a lot of background to gather that so that we could make the right decisions going forward. So no question, from my perspective, it was just, I loved doing it. It had a wonderful relationship with all of the players, and it was a very personally rewarding
Yes.
exercise.
And obviously the outcome was amazing.
From a strategic planning point of view, it was a pretty easy exercise because nobody had the answers. When I went around and asked about, how they look at the disease and how can we put this into bite-sized pieces so that both the clinicians and the researchers could identify just, what are we working on here? I mean, what are the objectives and what are the expected outcomes? As a good strategic planner, you not only want to plan the plan of action, but you want to have measurable outcomes. So it was a pretty easy exercise for me, and I had to just keep them in the tent so that we were all working towards it. And they had a lot to teach me about the disease and how we needed to look at it and whatnot. So we were both benefiting from the process, I think.
Yeah, and I think this contribution kind of shows the significance of patient partners in general and how, it really bridges the gap between like our research and what we're doing and who we're working with, who we're helping. So that's very important.
Yeah.
And how has your involvement and advocacy in research changed your perspective on life and influenced your day-to-day activities?
Well, it's not so much, I mean, having a project like this just fed my soul. So, I was helping somebody and getting the joy of seeing success. So from that point of view, it's been very, very rewarding. How did it change? The disease changes your perspective
Hmm.
on life. It's not this project. The disease changes you immensely. And, you know, um, having the reoccurrence even more so because, 20 years ago, life was easy.
Hmm.
I retired early. My husband was well. We had the resources to do whatever we wanted to do and travel, and we had a cottage, and we had a lovely life. And since then, my husband's had a stroke, so he's um, living in a facility, and of course, now I have this recurrent cancer. So, life is turned upside down, and so the disease has changed my perspective a great
Yeah.
deal. Not necessarily this project.
Mhm. No, that's understandable. And I think still with everything that's going on, it's so impressive that you still contribute as much as you can, not just to
Oh,
work, but also like in terms of funding. You've set up several funds for trainees and researchers in ovarian cancer, including the Nancy McKinstry Trainee Excellence Award and the Nancy McKinstry Endowment Fund for Ovarian Cancer Research. And I
yeah.
think it's now surpassed $935,000.
Yes. And, this has been in 18 months. We've raised almost $1 million. And
Wow.
it hasn't just been me. I've got this incredible group of friends and former colleagues and whatnot. And in fact, when I was diagnosed, two of my pals came to me and said, you need to do this. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't have time.
Yeah.
Trying to manage my life. And they talked me into it, and right from the get-go, people just fell in line. I mean, it
Yeah.
was an overwhelming response. And I think in the first 6 months we'd raised just over 400,000. And then a couple of other pals came to me and said, we need to do an event. And so we all threw our contact lists into a pot, and we had an incredible turnout, and we raised another $500,000 at
That's
that event.
amazing.
It's
Amazing.
amazing.
Yeah,
So,
truly.
needless to say, we're all thrilled. And
Hmm.
it's not sort of ending there. I'm still doing some work behind the scenes to raise some more money for that. And as our pretty much everybody, I think, that's donated has brought in other people to support it. So I couldn't be happier.
Hmm.
$1 million of research money doesn't come every day, certainly not through individuals and whatnot. So, it affords Old Care the opportunity to lever that money too.
Yeah.
So if we've raised $1 million, that could be 3 or 4 times more
Yes.
with using that to access other funds. So it's a pretty wonderful thing to have had the
Absolutely.
opportunity to do it. Yeah, I'm thrilled, and
And
that really again feeds my heart. I can't believe the generosity of the people around me. So it's been a remarkable experience.
yeah, it's amazing. And with your support of researchers already through the endowment prizes and your involvement as a co-founder of the Minerva Foundation, why is it valuable to you to support trainees and researchers?
Well, let's just talk about sort of what motivated me and another and a group of people. I was one of five that established the Minerva Foundation, and we were all senior businesswomen in the community. We fought the battles and all had success. And we just thought, we're a pretty powerful group here. How can we make this happen for other women? And I'm one of four girls in my family, so I'm the oldest, and I have three sisters. So I've been brought up in a house of women,
Mm-hmm.
and and always were supportive within my firm to encourage. And I was the only, when I was hired, I was the only woman in a senior position. And then today, over the last 5 years, they just reappointed somebody new, but we had a president who was a woman. 50% of the board members were women, and in the top 10 people, 70% of them were women. So,
Wow.
This goes back a long, long way, and I'm still very involved with Minerva, and this was just another opportunity. It's always bothered me that that the money spent on research, regardless of the disease or the whatever is happening in research, was targeted largely to men, even if it was a disease that affected both men and women. So that has always bothered me. And I thought, okay, here's an opportunity to actually help make that shift happen, so that a disease like ovarian cancer gets the same attention that prostate cancer does.
Yep.
That's a dream, but certainly it whether previously it was just never diagnosed, but every time I turn around, I'm hearing of another incidence of ovarian cancer
Yeah.
in my network of friends or colleagues. And we just have to do something. And I'm a victim in this case. So I'm not going to go lying down.
No, absolutely. And are there any other unique collaborations other than OVCare and GCI, or any of the ones we've already talked about, that you're particularly proud of?
Well, Minerva, of course, would be
Mhm.
one thing that they've been going since for over 20. We just had our 25th anniversary,
Wow.
and they have affected the lives of 8,000 women in the province. And because we drew participants from all over the province and paid for them to come to Vancouver and participate in our leadership initiatives. And we placed particular emphasis on the Indigenous women's population in BC. And so it's 8,000 individual women, and that doesn't include their children and their families.
Mm-hmm.
So the trickle down has been incredible. And most of these women, for us to identify them to participate, were leaders in their individual communities. And this, I think, was a huge motivator to give them a larger voice, and to not just make a difference for themselves, but to make a difference for their communities. So it's had tremendous impact. And just, and I believe the same about the OVCare and the endowment project, that if I can sort of help bring attention to the problem, my job is half done.
Yeah, I mean, the first step is bringing attention. It's actually quite a big step. It's quite shocking, actually, how much attention needs to be brought. How many questions are still unanswered. So,
Oh, that's exactly it. And
yeah.
it's so vast. I mean, I know absolutely nothing about science and research. What I do know is finance and marketing.
Mhm.
So we all play to our strengths.
Yeah, it's transferable skills.
Absolutely, that's absolutely right. So
Yeah,
that's
and
good.
what has been your biggest lesson, I guess, through your journey, that you think others should know?
Well, there's no mountain too big.
Hmm.
Um, and you can't do it by yourself. I guess if this all of the success of Minerva and the success of Care has nothing to do with me other than maybe creating a coalition of people with the same value system or the desire to get back in some way. So I think all you need to do is fundamentally is identify the problem, develop a strategy, and then work the plan. So
Yeah.
it's not that difficult a process, but it feels very big sometimes.
Hmm.
And as long as you recognize you're never going to do this by yourself, it's only through the work and the passion and the vision of the people around you.
Yeah,
Um, so that's a life lesson in itself.
definitely. And what do you hope that gynae cancer research prioritizes in the future and in the coming years?
I was thinking about that question last night because it's really not for me to say.
Hmm.
There's so much happening. I keep myself relatively up to date. There's work worldwide being done around PARP inhibitors. There's work worldwide being done about immunotherapy. Um, so as they learn more about, I mean, some very major things have been discovered in Vancouver to
Yeah.
date, and so they know what it's like to have success. And it's the brains like the David Huntsmans of this world that that are the ones to choose sort of which path they go along. And I think there's always culturally transitions that are made. And when I say cultural, I don't mean ethnicity. I mean, um, what's happening in the world
Yeah.
and what people's expectations are. And I think with the scientists and the clinicians that you have in Vancouver, it sets the stage for great things to happen in the future. I would never tell them to spend more time over here or here. All I could do is sort of present the objectives. And recently at this event that we had 9 of the doctors at the event, and we all sort of huddled as the event was closing down. And, it's been 5 years, just about 5 years since we established the original objectives. And
Hmm.
so I've gone through what we wrote. And what we need to do right now, I think, is go back and said what our desired outcomes were. And if they haven't been measured, measure the successes in the different areas, see where we're getting money, what's attracting donors,
Yep.
and what kind of results we're getting from those specific areas of research, and do another plan. I think
Hmm.
that the timing for that is critical for us to look at how things have changed, what some of the new technologies are. Are we taking advantage of all of those? And I think for the most part we are. You have to target certain areas. You can't
Yeah.
you can't throw a bunch of paint on the wall and hope it all sticks.
Yeah.
But I think the group is very clear on sort of next steps.
Yeah.
As a bit
I
of an
think they do a good job in terms of the
yeah,
research, moving with the times, what's, the priority. I think they're
yeah,
pretty good at that.
yeah. I sort of put myself up as a bit of a guinea pig when I was re-diagnosed with this recurrence of ovarian clear cell, because ovarian clear cell cancer is only 5% of ovarian cancers, and they hadn't used immunotherapy for ovarian cancer, and I said, well, let me be a guinea pig. Let's give it a try.
Mhm.
So I had 10 treatments of immunotherapy and until I couldn't tolerate it anymore. And then I responded very well to the radiation therapy, but I had a limited life there because of my previous cancer. And I had 35 radiation treatments then. And then I've been on a chemo drug, not the traditional 2 drugs that they gave me 20 whatever years ago, and so we're just measuring the results of that. So I think you've got to be prepared to sort of step out of your comfort zone, both as a researcher, clinician, and as a patient, because this fight's not over.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
Thanks for joining us on the GOSH podcast. To learn more about the Gynecologic Cancer Initiative and our podcast, make sure to check out our website at gynecancerinitiative.ca.